our friends and telling John that I was having breakfast across the street from his restaurants today. And oh my gosh, thank you, Annie. I love you so much. I was having breakfast across from Jon Kiper's restaurant today, and I thought about doing like a silly video out front, but I was like, that's probably like over the creep line. That's like a little bit too much. But if you are in Newmarket, June's makes the most delicious, what do they call them? Dutch babies. They're so good. They're so gross. They're so good. How are you doing tonight, Aria?
That's
What's up with
awesome.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. I had a long couple days, but very excited. Especially after Labor Day, had like kind of a day or two to decompress and check the news waves, and now we're back at it. It's very
I know.
excited to talk to
What's the
John.
latest? What are you fighting with the internet about today? I feel like I'm always tuning in
Talk
to see.
about it's the same. It's same old. It's for
Same
me.
battle.
It's a yeah. It's the same. It's the same kind of battle lines in the 2024 election where I think there is a group of Democrats that think this is a distraction. The article that I'm talking about. If you've seen my timeline, it's a
We're
lot of
talking about
that.
the Taylor Lorenz article
Taylor
about.
Lorenz article, yeah. And then there's and I'm not saying it's not a distraction, like it's a distraction from us talking about Zoran Mamdani and, other popular things within the Democratic Party. And I think that's the bigger story that like instead of popular policies, we decided to pay influencers. I think that's the
Mhm.
real canary in the coal mine. Not so much that they're getting paid. I don't think that's controversial at all. But we'll see. We'll see if they learn their lesson.
I always think it's interesting. Everyone always says everything's a distraction, and I'm like, we can do multiple things at once.
Yeah, yeah.
I can be annoyed about like 15 things at the same time. I have great capacity for rage.
For sure. And I am very cognizant now, especially that I'm focusing more on New Hampshire politics, how I want to make sure everything that I talk about is kind of related at least to like local politics. And I feel strongly that I'm just trying to make that connection too, that it does affect everything, including the work that we're doing, on a daily
Hmm.
basis. So
Yeah, I have not been getting my checks. So if APAC
yeah,
was
yeah,
sending
yeah,
out checks to
exactly. What
influencers, I
the
did not get mine, and I'm pretty
for
upset
sure.
about that. All right, I'm gonna pull John. I'm gonna add you in right now as a guest, so you should see an invite popping up in just a second. So somebody asked in the chat, a Dutch baby is like a dough. I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like a custard. It's like custard in the middle, but it's like a dough on the sides, and it's like a little like bougie. It's not pizza is not the right word. It's just very good. It's like baked good, but sweet and savory. I highly recommend it. Hey, John.
Thanks for having me.
How are you? John, you sound like your mic isn't plugged in either. I'm always the audio police. I'm so sorry, but
Can
I
you hear
just
me
have to
now?
be honest.
Can you hear
I
me
can
now?
hear you. I can hear you. It's just not coming through the mic. It's coming through like room noise. That's okay. I'll keep talking about pastries for a minute if you want to plug and unplug. I was just
Please.
telling these people I joined this live with 30% battery and then expected to plug a mic into my phone too. And I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. I have my whole nice setup, but I'm not using it. We're just using AirPods tonight.
Is that any better?
That's beautiful.
Ooh.
Perfection. See, you
Okay,
can
great.
tell. Once you start
Flipped
listening to these
over the
things,
flipped over the plug. Works every time.
how's it going, John? It's good to meet you. We haven't actually like spoken in real time other than on the internet, so it's good to chat with you.
I know it's so funny to me seeing people in real life that you've only sort of like commented on their videos or whatever. I often make these videos and just assume no one watches them. And then I go out in the world and people are like, "Hey, I saw that video." And I'm like, "Oh God, which one was it?"
I get that too. Somebody on a work call the other day was like, Marissa, I saw your personal post, free Palestine. I was like, yeah, I mean, let's go. Like, if we're talking about this on a corporate, like, let's go. But it is funny. And do you find that since now this is your second time running, do you find that you are getting spotted in the streets more often? Or like, do people recognize you out and about?
It happens occasionally. It's kind of funny. I went to water country with my son and my nephews this summer, and one of my nephews goes, he was like, "It would be cool if you were the kind of famous where people like saw you and knew who you were."
That's such a diss. I love that. That's
He's like
like,
10,
ouch.
it's like totally 10-year-old attitude.
It'd be cool if you were real famous instead
I
of just
know.
boring politics famous. Well, John, to kick us off today, I think a lot of people I think a lot of folks here probably are generally a little bit familiar with you just because you have done such a great job by making yourself super available and present online, which I think is like a huge differentiator and I think is appreciated. Um, but assuming folks have some level of familiarity with you, give us a little bit of an intro in terms of you're running again for governor. This is not your first rodeo. Tell us a bit about why you decided to get back into this game. I've heard the joke that it's because you had many signs in your home, which I think is a very funny reason to run again. Not to step on your bit, but tell me a little bit about why, in sincerity, you're doing this again, and what is different this time.
The run we did last time was kind of an experiment. And even though I hoped I was going to win, it was sort of a setup for a second run. And I said to myself, we live in a small state. I'm only 40. I was 41 then. I'm 42 now. I could run every 2 years for the next 10 years,
You're in it for the long haul.
Well, and I mean, once you got the infrastructure, you got the website, you got the signs, you got the logo. I mean, that's like a huge part of the initial like sort of expenditure. And I just figured, these issues are not going away. And honestly, if there was someone else out there solving these issues, I wouldn't be here. This is not about me. I frankly don't even want to do this. I feel like I have to because we have to fix the lives of poor and working class people in New Hampshire. And that's why my campaign is about lowering property taxes, funding education in a constitutional way, and also, bringing affordable housing to New Hampshire, all of which are sort of combined into one big problem.
I'm curious, you brought up something interesting. And, as I'm somebody who's still relatively new to New Hampshire politics, tell me a bit about why you think you said nobody's else is sort of stepping up to do this. For those of us who have no idea, like why do you think that is? Why don't you think that there's more of right now, for those who aren't familiar, I think it's just you and Kelly in the race, as far as I know. What's the reasoning there, you think?
So basically in New Hampshire, it's a 2-year cycle. It's a very short cycle. And there's only been one governor in, I think, the entire history of the state that has not won a second term, and that was Craig Benson. And it was in the early 2000s. I don't exactly remember what he did. He was really rich and basically bought his seat. And I can't remember why people hated him, but they did not like him. So there's an assumption by all of the people that want to further themselves in politics in New Hampshire that Kelly Ayotte is going to win a second term. And so it would be a waste of money, time, and political capital to run against her until 2028, where she might not even run again. Who knows? She might move on to bigger and better things. And also, some of the pressure was taken off because CD1 opened up, because Chris Pappas is now running for Gene Sheen's Senate seat. So it's actually really funny because I heard that Maura Sullivan's people were trying to get Stephanie Shaheen to run for governor. And Stephanie Shaheen's people were trying to get Maura Sullivan to run for governor because they didn't want to run against each other. And they were like, hey, one of you go do that other job. But the thing is, nobody wants to be governor of New Hampshire because you have to deal with the real problems of our state. And they're massive. And the fiscal sort of dark hole that we're going into is going to be really hard to deal with. And I think most people just don't want to deal with it. Like, I had a guy who's he's in his 80s. He's been involved in Democratic politics for years. And he said people will line up to run for CD1, CD2, Senate. People don't want to run for governor because you have to actually deal with the problems. You can run for Senate and say, hey, Medicare for all. Is it going to happen? Probably not, but you can say it. It sounds good. Whereas in New Hampshire, you really have to actually deal with just this massive fiscal crisis that we're in.
And John, it's absolutely so nice to meet you too. I mean, we've talked to each other so many times on TikTok, and finally getting a chance to actually talk to each other. I've been looking forward to it a lot. And
same.
Speaking of your online presence, man, it's a unique thing, for a candidate, at least on TikTok. Some of our candidates, they don't even have TikTok accounts, and I see you posting every day, multiple times a day, talking to people in chat, and I want to know what your thoughts are on that as a strategy. Do you plan on, is that going to be one of the fundamental parts of your strategy? Do you find yourself different than everyone else in that sense? And yeah, I just wanted you to talk more about your online presence, I guess.
So last time that I ran, my campaign manager was on all the social media, but she wasn't on TikTok. So she would never see the TikTok videos that I was making. And occasionally I would put them on, usually I put certain ones on TikTok and I don't put them all on Facebook and Instagram because it's like a different audience. So I put the
Absolutely.
the less crazy ones on Meta because those people are a little bit more conservative, if you will. And so she wasn't seeing any of my TikTok videos, and it was really funny because sometimes I'd make one and I'm like, she's never gonna, like, if she saw this, she's gonna freak out. But I realized that, like, we have nothing to lose, and if you do a good TikTok video, you might connect with 1,000 people, and maybe 500 of them are in New Hampshire. Whereas in the same amount of time, I could go to one Democratic meeting and maybe see 7 or 8 people, like literally. So the numbers are just really good. And then the first time, before I had a manager, a campaign manager or anything, I said, I'm just going to focus on social media. It's free. It's what I know how to do. I've been doing it for my business for 10 years. And if all this is a social media campaign and that's all that I do, then so be it. Let's just see how far we can get using every free resource that exists. And I think that more people should be open to doing this. And the problem with a lot of the career politicians is they're so afraid of saying something that isn't approved by the campaign that they just don't want to do this sort of back and forth because they just want to stick to their talking points. And I think people are starting to see that that's just, it's shallow, and it proves that they're afraid of something. What are they afraid to say? What value do they have that they don't want to tell you about? And that they're just constantly going back to the donors and to the people that are the consultants and saying, hey, what's polling right now? What can I talk about? And to me, it's like, you got to look at polls for sure because it does help to know that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, like, I've got my beliefs, and those aren't going to be swayed by any polling one way or the other.
And I think it's interesting because you get such a good sense of what the topics are just being here, right? It's very clear to see the wave of like what people care about day over day. I would love to get a little bit, you talked a bit about how this is like a free tactic for you, and it's super important. And I think this is really important for a lot of progressive candidates we're seeing, but like specifically candidates that are outside of the mainstream and are not maybe embraced by the party establishment. I think such a big part of what you're doing is fundraising. Such a big part of like getting your name out and doing this type of campaign is fundraising. What did you learn about that the last time? And do you have any advice for other candidates that are trying to make a name for themselves at this point in the cycle?
I use social media where we didn't have funds, basically, because I figured, one of the things that I realized early on was we were not going to be getting big corporate donations, and basically we raised a bunch of money. I maxed out a couple credit cards. I put in some of my own money. It was a real grassroots campaign, and fundraising is literally the hardest part. It's the part that I'm the worst at. I still don't have easy answers for that. It's really, really tough, but that's where the social media is just such an easy place to get FaceTime and to try and get into people's algorithms who aren't necessarily following the news. And that's really just where, because it's not just Facebook, but, TikTok, or not just TikTok, but Facebook, Meta, LinkedIn. I started putting videos just Substack, anywhere I could. YouTube, obviously. We even had, for a little while, we were doing a show on Manchester Public Access TV, and that was going out to like Channel 13 in Manchester. So I was just looking for every free way to do it. And eventually it dawned on me where I was like, the way to get money out of politics is to do politics with as little money as possible. Every time I say that, my campaign manager is like, but you got to pay me. And I'm like, yes, but we're going to pay you. But, and I think that there really is a way to do it. We just have to really look at social media as, 70% of the population is on social media. So you got to look at it and say, all right, this age group is on TikTok, this age group is on Meta, this age group is on YouTube, and these folks are on LinkedIn. And how do we connect to all of them? And not look at it as like a monolith, but like each one has its own uses, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some questions in here. Someone was asking about Substack. Like, I think we're all kind of thinking about what comes next. It sounds like you're very much in that same headspace. I want to pivot a little bit to policy. And then I'm actually going to dip for like 2 minutes because my kid is crying in the other room. So I'm going to go on pause and leave you and Aria to chat. But I would love to just set you up to chat a little bit more about policy specifically. I think there's a lot of folks this week that are urgently talking about Claremont. I would love for you to talk a little bit. I know you've been talking about that as well. Talk a little bit about how you think about the role of governor as needing to be involved in that type of situation and kind of how you're thinking about that big budget hole that you're talking about.
So it's really important for people to understand that the state of New Hampshire, our Constitution, really holds up education as being necessary for the function of the state. And if you go through and read the Constitution of New Hampshire, it's really helpful to see what the founders of this state wanted. And they wanted us to protect and fund education. So the current situation with Claremont, from what I can gather, it has to do with COVID money and spending COVID money, and I'm not exactly sure if they weren't reimbursed for it or if they didn't have the paperwork correct to get the reimbursements for the COVID money, but it seems to be around COVID money. That's like what the issue is. So it's important for people to realize that the state of New Hampshire has been running since 2020 off of COVID money. You know, your town has been, this state has been, this country has been, and so has many businesses. You know, we've been running off of COVID money. So it's just, we have a real hole now in our financing, and a lot of these schools and towns were relying on this COVID money, and it's gone. So I think that's contributing to the problems in Claremont. But obviously, you know, it's important to understand that Claremont sued the state of New Hampshire in 1991 because the way that we fund our schools is not legal. It does not. They're not funded adequately, and they're not funded at the same level. And it's because we use property taxes in towns that have more expensive property have lower rates, and towns with less expensive property have higher rates. And it's a regressive system, and people really need to understand this. In New Hampshire, the poorest towns pay the most as a percentage of their income for public education, and the richest towns pay the least. So that's just, it's crucial that people understand how that formula works. It's a little bit complicated, but it's just really important to understand that part of it.
What would be your strategy in again, teaching people that, educating the nitty gritty? And do you have a plan for like day one, if Jon Kiper wins governorship of New Hampshire day one, what's your plan for a situation like Claremont right now? Is there something you could do day one that would help them out?
Yeah, I mean, the fundamentals are that the judicial system has told, the courts have told the legislature, hey, you have to change the way that you fund schools. You know, you have to increase the funding. You know, one of the judges even said you've got to go from $4,000 per student to, I think, close to $8,000, a little bit under $8,000. And the issue is that the courts, the judges are telling the legislature this, but there's no enforcement mechanism. So as a governor, I will be the enforcement mechanism, say to the legislature, you have to fund the schools in an adequate and constitutional way. If you're in government, you've sworn an oath to the New Hampshire Constitution, and we've got to uphold that. And the Republicans love to talk about the Constitution and their love of it, and they need to read it a little bit better because, as someone mentioned in the comments, it's also unconstitutional for state money to be going to religious education. It's in there actually twice. It's in the Constitution. It's mentioned twice. And so that part of the education freedom vouchers, which, you know, we can probably talk about, or I assume you'd want to, is clearly a violation of the Constitution. And they get around it with this, you know, they have this nonprofit that sort of takes the money in, but it's a violation of what the intention was by the founders of our state. And I think that's just really important to understand. Like, we live in a state built by people that loved education, and we should love it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a little bit more about the voucher situation here in New Hampshire, because this is obviously a really important topic currently. So tell us a little bit about your point of view here, and give folks an overview for who are not aware.
So if you don't know, these voucher programs have basically been popping up all over the country, and more or less it's almost pretty much the same playbook because it's pushed by the same conservative groups, and it's $4,000 given directly from the state out of the educational trust fund to a family to either homeschool their kids, send them to a private school, or even, you know, if they're homeschooled, they can buy school supplies. I think they've even been used for ski passes and stuff like that. It's really underregulated. But the problem, I mean, that is a problem in itself. But the issue for me, when I first heard about this, I was like, this is crazy. And no one was talking about it. And I was on the Newmarket Town Council at the time. And the initial projection was that the first year was supposed to cost $127,000. And it cost over $8 million. And I called up the Department of Education and I said, hey, if the firefighter in my town said that the new fire truck was going to cost $127,000 and it ended up costing $8 million, he'd be fired on the spot, no question, right? And it was so funny because the woman at the Department of Education literally was like, "Where'd you get that number?" And I was like, "From a memo your office just put out," you know? And she didn't even know about it. And then the scary thing was that clearly nobody was calling to complain about it because literally Frank Edelbu called me back up about a half an hour later to defend the program, and his analogy was so bad. He goes, you know, you own a restaurant. It's like you do a Taco Tuesday deal and everyone shows up. So like it means it's a popular deal. Like we did this voucher thing and all these people signed up. So it means it's a really good deal. And I'm like, that's just not fiscally conservative. It's not fiscal management. Like, can you guys at least stick to your line? You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be conservative, be a conservative, but don't feed me this BS and then say it's conservative. Like, come on.
Honestly, it's hard to tell who the conservative is in any given like situation in any type of politics right now. It's getting more and more difficult. But speaking of that, not being able to tell and switching up, you had some big news the past couple of days, right? I've been introducing you all the past week as the independent candidate for governor, and then you hit us with that big surprise. And I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about that, talk to the kind of strategizing that went behind that, and do you think there are pros and cons to that? I'm sure there are. I'm sure you believe there are. But go ahead and talk to us about what you think you're gaining by switching to the Democratic ticket.
So when I initially wanted to run at the very beginning, I wanted to run as an independent because I'm just an independent person. I didn't want to be constrained by the party. I didn't want to have to work within their, guidelines or feel like I had to carry issues that I didn't support because I was a Democrat. But to be honest, I've been a registered Democrat since 2016. Since Trump got on the scene, I was like, I'm not voting for a Republican. I'm a Democrat. And basically, I was told by some people, hey, run as a Democrat. You won't get any traction otherwise. So I said, okay. So I ran as a Democrat. And as soon as the primary was finished and I lost, I said, I don't want to be in another Democratic primary in which I'm going to lose to someone whose wealth or is better funded, is more connected with the party, but will lose in the general election. And so I made that decision literally like, September, October, November. I was like, I'm going to run again, but I'm going to do it as an independent. And then basically, since then, Trump's authoritarian takeover has just amped up so much faster than I ever imagined it would. And the way that the independent run would work is the first year we get 10%. Second cycle, we get 20. By 10 years down the line, maybe we win, right? And you're building this coalition. You're building all of this infrastructure. You got to have town groups and county groups. And so I had in my head this whole 10-year vision. And all of a sudden I'm looking at the news and I'm like, we don't have 10 years. We may not even have 10 months. And the big thing, and then also I had some Democrats, county and town leaders that were saying, hey, you should do a write-in campaign with the Democrats, or you should just run as a Democrat. So people were asking me to. And then I went to a couple of events just to sort of feel it out. And the reality is this, there's a lot of people that call themselves independents, but they're really voting for a left or right every time anyway. And everyone who's politically sort of minded and is donating and is involved, they've picked a side. They're either on the Dems or the Republicans. And there's just not as many people in the middle who are ready to form a coalition and do the work. And for instance, I met with Forward Party. You know those guys, Forward Foundation, Forward Party. It's Andrew Yang's sort of third party incubator. I met with them, and this was so funny because they basically were like, yeah, cool. Call us when you know who you're running against, and we'll decide whether or not we can help you. And I was like, okay, so it's dependent on who the Democrat is. Okay. And then same was happening when we were calling different donors. They were saying, well, I don't know who the Democrat's going to be. Maybe it's my buddy Tom Sherman, or maybe it's my old friend Cindy Wormington, So I was like, I'm kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, where if I'm an independent, I got to wait for a Democrat to align myself against. And then the final thing was that I went to the Cheshire County spaghetti dinner last Sunday, and I was kind of feeling out, the crowd to see what they would think about me. I was just introducing myself as running for governor. I didn't mention what party, and people were just really receptive to the message. And then, frankly, what really hit home was Ro Khanna was the keynote speaker, and he gave this really powerful speech. And it was just a really good vision, an economic vision for the future about how we bring back manufacturing and how we rebuild the country, basically. And it was like, I can be a part of this Democratic Party that Ro Khanna is like sort of, building. And same with, Bernie's an independent, but this is kind of funny. I just learned this a couple weeks ago, which had to do with my changeover too. Bernie runs in the Democratic primary for Senate in Vermont, and then he declines the nomination and runs as an independent to make sure there isn't a Democrat to his left, or I guess to his right, that would potentially be running against him. So he basically stops there from being 3 candidates in the race. And another thing that I learned was that, and I should have probably researched this before I decided to run as an independent, but almost every successful independent candidate at the governor level, such as Jesse Ventura or Angus King, they were already pretty famous before they ran. And you basically need the apparatus of a party, which is just, what the party has is town and county meetings that are happening every month all over the state at the same place, roughly the same time. And that's what you really need to build out a party. And the other thing too, another part of it was I was thinking about, what if this app is shut down? And what if all of our Democratic leftist content is completely censored off the internet? Like, how do we organize? Well, we could just start showing up to our Democrat town and city committees, because they're meeting in the same spot every month. It doesn't change. The time doesn't change. And that was a network I realized that we could use as sort of a resistance network if this social media is down, and we need to really plan, for instance, a general strike, right? Let's say there's no social media. We got to plan a general strike. How do we communicate if somehow I couldn't message you on here? We could plan it through this network that already exists. So I just didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And fundamentally, the Democrats didn't have a candidate. And I thought, let's all coalesce around this fact that we have to stop the authoritarian overtake of this country. And I don't want to be part of the problem. I don't want to be part of the division. I need to get over myself. I need to get over my ego. I need to, get over the Democratic Party and the parts that I don't like, and realize the Democratic Party is not the DNC. The Democratic Party is the thousands of people that knock doors and phone bank and do all the hard work that the DNC sort of, messages for. But we can't hold all of them accountable for, a couple of bad apples, or not even a couple, but, for the bad actions of the DNC. And I think there is a lot of good people that are doing a lot of hard work, and they deserve to have candidates who, are on the same level as them. I don't know if you saw this recently, but I think it was 70 or 75% of Democrats do not want to arm Israel anymore. We're in the majority. We're in the majority, and the DNC is not. And so when you go knock doors with people, you probably agree with them more than they agree, or you agree with the DNC. So it's sort of like, let's forget about the DNC. Let's focus on New Hampshire and what's the best way for us to help New Hampshire, and it's through the Democratic Party.
Hey, if you've been following me on TikTok, you don't have to talk to me about the branding of the Democrats right now and how sour that is. So that was definitely a question I was looking forward to asking you, because I knew of you as independent, and I thought that was a little bit of a breath of fresh air. But you're right. This is the system that was given to you, right? And you have to work within that system. And I hate that it has to be that way, but I think that makes you more competitive probably. And then just the one big question that I ask every candidate that has come on here so far is, what is your one issue, your line in the sand issue, the issue that you would lose your governorship over, that you would resign before you bent over for that issue? What's that? I guess what's that one issue that drives you, that really that motivates you the most?
For me, the first job of the government should be to take care of the weakest amongst us. Children that don't have parents, elderly people, people that are sick, people that are have disabilities. these are the people that the government really needs to start helping first. And that is how I think you build a strong community, which is why I'm outraged by the way that the current Kelly Ayotte administration is dealing with the YDC lawsuits. I mean, this is an insane story, and these people deserve justice. And especially when the state is taking children into their custody and then torturing them literally, and then doesn't want to pay up, and then also is then defunding DHHS to the tune of $51 million, which is the department that oversees YDC, which is only ensuring there will be more abuse in the future. I feel like ensuring that, and this seems like a very low bar, but the basic thing the government should not do is abuse children in its custody. Yet this is happening. So that is kind of my line in the sand, where I will go to the ropes. I will die on the hill of protecting children, particularly children who have been abandoned by their parents. I feel like they are really, like it's like 50% of homeless people are former foster children. That like breaks my heart as a father of a 9-year-old, that these kids were abandoned by their parents and then abandoned by society. And it's really just, it's a tragedy that we are one of the wealthiest states in the country. People forget about this. We're like number 2 or number 5, depending on what scale you look at. There's plenty of money in New Hampshire, but we need a government that is willing to extract that money from the rich and ensure that the poor do not have to live on the street.
Speaking of some of these vulnerable populations, we asked in our NH Talk Discord channel, which I'll do a little plug for the Discord. It's linked in my bio if you're looking for a non-TikTok, non-video place to share. And I was letting people know we were having this conversation tonight, asking them what questions they had for you. And I think a lot of folks in our community are really concerned about issues surrounding women's rights, about the LGBTQ community, about trans rights in New Hampshire, about gay marriage. All these issues, unfortunately, shouldn't be something that we have to talk about, but are in the current moment. So can you talk a little bit about how you feel you'll be able to go to the mat for these communities?
Yeah. I want to say about a lot of issues is that a lot of times the Democrats have these self-serving answers that are preaching to the choir. So when I'm trying to come up with my argument or my defense of anything, I think of a couple of conservative-leaning uncles that I have. People that have voted for Democrats for president, but have also voted for Republicans. And to me, the angle for almost all of these social issues is live free or die. We should let people live their lives. The legislature, we have 400 representatives. They're not paid, so there's not a lot of, it's not like it's 400 doctors, right? It's not like it's 400 like medical professionals that are then dictating what medical treatments are allowed. Like that's just not how it is. And so we should leave the medical professional to decide what medical treatment any one person, can get, and let science do its thing and figure out what's the best ways for, women to deal with their medical, all the various ways that things can go wrong during a pregnancy. And, same with trans people and trans children, let's let the doctors do the medicine and let's focus on the real problems that, that we as a state are dealing with, especially it's really a way that the Republicans sidetrack the Democrats, and they lob these bombs at us, in attacking trans kids. And we have to focus on the fact that trans children are just like the rest of us, entitled to that live free or die ethos. And I think that every time they make a law, they should say to themselves, is this live free or die? Recently there was a guy who was, he got in trouble in Manchester for selling pickles. And it's like,
saw those.
You know what I mean? And it's like, they should just ask themselves, is this live free or die? Is regulating, a woman's uterus live free or die? It's not. It's not. That's big government. That's more big government. Regulating what any medical treatment someone could get, and especially for those conservative men, they start with abortion, but they're going to come after your Viagra next. Because you're using that to not create babies, and this is all part of the white Christian ethno state. And I think people need to understand how all of these things link up. That it's all part of the Project 2025 agenda. And it's all part of their bigger movement. And I mean, the fact that people are asking me, I had a woman in my comments, she was like, I want to support you, but my wife said I should ask if you if you support, our marriage. And I was like, this is so crazy that it's 2025. And I have to tell you that, yes, I am in favor of gay marriage. I'm in favor of anyone getting married. I'm not personally married, so I'm not in favor of myself getting married, but everyone else, you can do it, and that we have to even be having these discussions it's terrible, but we do. We have to affirm these basic principles of who we are and what we stand for. And I think just New Hampshire, of all places, should be live free or die, where people can live their lives however they choose to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to hand it over to Aria in a minute to do a little bit of a rapid fire, but I think we've got a lot of questions in the chat around budget. I think this is very top of the news this week and is in a lot of people's faces. Obviously, we are significantly in the hole in New Hampshire. You're seeing that at every turn. You talked a little bit about taxing the rich. Tell us a little bit more about how you intend to solve some of these budget challenges that are crippling us at a state level.
So it's pretty basic. We have to raise more revenue in New Hampshire. We cannot get around that. It's the only way that we can go forward and have a functioning state. And the reality is we don't have enough money. So who has money? It's not poor people. It's not middle class people. It's rich people and the corporations that they own. So there's a couple really basic things that we can do to generate more revenue. Legalizing cannabis and taxing would be a simple one. Rolling back the business taxes to what we were doing in 2015, 2016 would raise about $100 million or so. And I made a video about this, but back of the calendar or back of the envelope calculation is that if we did a 1% tax on people making over $250,000 a year, we would raise $150 million per year. And that would only be 3 or 4, maybe 5,000 per household that was paying that tax. So we're not talking about a ton of money. And that's what people got to really understand is that we need revenue and we got to decide who's going to pay it. And we got to decide where is it going to come from? Another example is like the rooms and meals tax. Last session, they dropped it from 9 to 8.5%. Now, for me as a restaurant owner, the only difference is that it's maybe $1,000, $2,000 a year that I'm getting, more money than I was before. But on the aggregate, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that the state is losing in revenue. And I would love to see the interest and dividends come back. That was a tax that mainly hit people making over $200,000 a year. So the interest and dividends was actually a really good tax the rich. And we had that on the books for decades, for a long, long time. I'd like to see that one come back. And fundamentally, we just need to have this conversation in the state of New Hampshire. Who has money to pay more taxes, and how are we going to get it from them in a way that's fair and equitable? Because the system that we have right now doesn't work.
It's a great answer. And John, I'm going to be honest with you right now. You're going to be my guinea pig for this, because this is a lightning round that I've been working on for these interviews. And I want to, we asked some pretty serious questions here, pretty on the nose questions. And, I was thinking like just a short 10 to 15 question. Don't think too hard about it. Tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Some of them are fun. Some of them are kind of serious. And
all right,
we'll see where we go. All right. You ready to go?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. First question, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
What's your go-to late night diner order in New Hampshire?
It's cheeseburger and fries.
Okay, simple, very simple. Should New Hampshire adopt a $15 minimum wage?
Yes, I think we definitely. I mean, 15 is really the minimum.
Would you ever accept APAC money?
No.
What's a bigger New Hampshire problem, bears, moose, or potholes?
Potholes.
If you had to ban one thing statewide tomorrow, what would it be?
Ban one thing? Mm-hmm. Massachusetts drivers. Build a wall.
That's a good answer. Okay. Who would play you in the movie version of your campaign?
What's that guy, Pascal, the guy from Star Wars?
You're aiming
Pedro
big,
Pascal.
brother. Pedro
I've been
Pascal.
told that.
All right. Hey, aim for the stars, man. All right. Last question. Who would win in a debate? You, Chris Sununu, or a Dunkin' manager at 6 a.m.?
I'm going to say the Dunkin' manager at 6 a.m., man. They got to be fired up and ready to fight. I can only imagine.
Perfect. Perfect. Those are great answers. I thank you for being a good sport. Those are awesome answers.
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, that can stay. We can keep that for the next one.
Okay.
That was
Sweet.
good. I
We
like
got
that
that
one.
for the
You
next one. We
surprised
got
me
that
with
for the
that one.
next one. All right. Sweet.
Talk a little bit. We'll keep you just for a few more minutes, but I think we got through some really great stuff today. If folks have questions in the chat that we didn't get to, feel free to resurface them. But I did want to just resurface another topic that came up a lot uh, in asking folks what they wanted to know from you. People are very concerned about what's happening with the Free State movement and folks that are coming here with the intention of sort of dismantling a lot of our government programs. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously, the governor's interaction with that would look a little bit different, but can you talk a little bit about how you wrap your head around that group of folks and that ideology and how you think we can kind of move forward with a functioning government, state government?
Yeah, the Free State Project is, one of the problems with it is that people don't know about it, and local journalism is really is pretty much non-existent. I mean, you guys
Yeah, I mean, look at
basically,
us two dumbasses
I know,
up here.
yeah, I mean, you guys are basically it. And we've got to really get the message out, because the number of people that I go and talk to in the street and I say, do you know about the Free State Project? And they're like, what are you talking about? And that's a big issue. People need to understand that these people came here to disrupt our lives, and they are the reason why we don't have car inspections, and the reason for the education vouchers, and the reason for many other things. And I think at its core, and this is something I talked about a lot in my last run, I haven't been talking about it as much, but the only reason the Free State Project is possible in New Hampshire is because we do not pay our state reps. And as a reason, because we don't pay the state reps, you have these people in these little towns, in these far north areas, where if somebody's running, there might be not anyone that can afford to drive to Concord 3 or 4 days a week to run against them. And the Free Staters will literally sleep on mom's couch, sleep on a friend's couch. They will beg, borrow, and steal to run. And they will do everything that they can to get in there, and they will be as disruptive as possible. And I think if they've done one thing wrong, it was they've made too much noise. So people are finding out about them. There was the libertarian who walked into a bear. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a really good book about what they did in Grafton County, and so the word is getting out there. And I will be honest. So I think it's worth trying to communicate with them and saying to them, like, you guys came here and you want to create this libertarian utopia. Okay, let's focus on things that we agree on, such as let's legalize cannabis. We can work on that together. Let's lower some of the zoning and planning laws so that we can build more housing. I was at in the State House last time testifying on a bill about it was increasing ADUs or eliminating parking minimums. And there was a guy that was from the Free State Project, and he said, hey, this is an issue that libertarians and progressives are actually on the same page at. And I think even with the Free State Project, it's important that when we can find, things that we agree on, go there and try to get things done. Because with the current system that we have, we are not, defeating the Free State Project. We're not kicking them out. They're not getting, that's not going to happen. So can we sort of try to bridge that gap and say, hey, I understand where you're coming from in a way. And sure, we all want to live in a state with, minimal laws, I guess. But let's focus on the things that we agree on, and instead of getting caught up in them and letting them do the things that are hurting people, like dismantling public education.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and maybe it's my naivety, so I'm gonna have to think about it a little bit. But I think your point about collaborating with them and trying to find like what are the areas of overlap is interesting, because right now they're just sort of going after like trans kids and stuff too, and it's like, let's redirect away from harming people and towards legalizing cannabis, so we're not giving all of our tax funds to Maine. Not that I would be doing that. Ari is probably giving his to Massachusetts, so it's fine.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No idea. But a couple of other questions that got resurfaced too quickly just before we wrap up. Just a couple of like light topics like vaccinations and what's going on with the changing CDC vaccine recommendations. In the news this week, there was conversation about New Hampshire's absence from the rest of the Northeast governors meeting to form separate recommendations. Thanks, Bridget, for giving me that exact wording that I stole from your Discord question. But really, I think I'm a mom of a young child. A lot of my friends are moms and parents, and I think everybody kind of woke up to that this week and was like, wait, what the fuck is going on? Why can't I get what's going on with the vaccines? So talk a little bit about that, and like specifically from a vaccine perspective, but then also this sort of dynamic we have right now where the rest of these Northeast states are coalescing and working together on a lot of projects. This is not the first time we've seen New Hampshire remove ourselves from that group of governors. So can you talk a little bit again about vaccines, but also about that kind of dynamic of governors in the Northeast?
Yeah, I am pro-vaccine, if I have to say that, and I've got a son in the public school system who is vaccinated. I do not want him to get measles. It's a problem. It's a huge problem. We had a measles outbreak this year, and I think this is probably one of the worst hangover effects from COVID is the vaccine denialism, and it's so bad because it can make babies sick and die. And I think that's why it really triggers me a lot. But I think, speaking to your idea of New England, I think this is really what drives me to want to be governor, is the idea that if I'm in there, I can work with Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, greater New York. And we really are in this point where the federal government is in many ways, many chunks of it are literally being dissolved by MAGA and by Trump, like whole big pieces of it are just gone. But we as New Englanders, we've got the money, we've got the network, we've got the economy. We will be fine regardless of what happens to the rest of the country. And I love this idea of having our own sort of regional, government where we're doing our own thing. And like, if Texas wants to do whatever, I'm kind of getting to this point where I can't worry about all 50 states. I can only worry about New Hampshire and New England. Like, it's just too big of a country. And I think that, whether or not you like it, Donald Trump is already pushed the balkanization of the United States. And we'll see how that plays out. But I can see California, Washington, Oregon becoming its own sort of autonomous, economic region. And I can see New England doing the same thing. And I think that in the long term, it will be better for us and be better for New England writ large, and that our vaccine policies could be even better than what the United States has now. And we won't have to do this back and forth Republican Democrat thing. It'll just be the New England way,
That's interesting. And I actually appreciate hearing you say that in sort of plain terms, because I feel like I've been saying that to people in my life. And I think everyone kind of looks at you like you're a little bit cuckoo bananas when you say that. And they're like, you need to touch some grass. And I'm like, my friends, I have been touching grass. I think no pun intended, but you all need to touch some grass. But I do think that I think it's realistic that we're moving, regardless of what you think is happening next, we are moving into a system where the states are going to have increased power and these regions will have increased power together. So I think it's important we start like talking about that realistically. Arya, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're winding down slowly, right? So I have like just one last quick question for you, which is, if you had to describe your campaign in one word, or let's say one sentence, what would you be? What would that sentence be?
Fight for the working class.
Easy questions.
It's fight for the working
sorry.
class. I mean, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm here for. That's, my whole experience as a business owner and as a resident and as a town councilor and as a parent of a school, I just see the working people in my community struggling more and more and more. I was talking to one of my friends. She lives right down the street. Her rent went from $1,200 7 years ago to it's now $1,800, and they want to evict her to put it up to $2,400. And this is just crazy. And not only is it just painful for everyone, but if someone's rent is doubling in that amount of time and their income is not, that's way less money to spend at burger shops like mine. I mean, this is just basic economics, that we can't have small businesses and small restaurants and little cafes if everyone's paying $2,400 in rent. So helping the working class is really my driving force, and it's really what keeps me going.
And this is the final one, and then we'll wrap it up. I think I've said final one like 4 times in this conversation, but we have a good amount of people here still. So I just wanted to give you one.
Yeah, keep going. I'm good.
Moment to ask you. You've done this. You've run before. This is your second time. Are there any misconceptions around you that are floating around out there that you think people have gotten the wrong idea that you'd like to take the opportunity to maybe correct?
We did have some rumors. So my campaign manager was a Free State Project member, and that's what actually brought her here in 2014, 2015. And it's kind of a funny story because she moved here with her then husband. They've now been divorced for quite a long time, but she moved here with him, and he basically was like, hey, you should go run for state rep, and I'll basically like tell you what to do. And she's like a really bubbly person, so she won. She got into the state house, and then very quickly realized that the Free State Project was not what she wanted to be a part of at all. And according to her, when it started out, it was a lot more like LGBTQ friendly. It was a lot more, just I forget how she described it, but it was. She said it was basically like a lot of gay autistic nerds, and that it just sort of changed as different people showed up and took over the party or took over the movement. And so she got out, after about a year, divorced that guy, and then realized that she was a progressive. And so it dogged our campaign for and I didn't really think it was that. And she kept saying to me, I shouldn't be your campaign manager because they're going to bring up this Free State Project stuff. And she kept looking for somebody else, but I was like, dude, it's just you. Don't worry about it. But even like the day before, this is actually funny, the day before the primary, we're getting ready to go hold up our signs. And I had Karishma was helping me. And Karishma was trying to get some people to hold signs for me. And they were like, oh, I think that guy's like a secret Free State Projector. And I was like, and this is the day before the primary. And I'm like, oh my God, we are so screwed. And then even it came up because what happened is some of the Free State Project people ran as Democrats because they knew they'd have a better chance depending where they were living. So the Democrats got super paranoid about it. And a couple of other times they were like, are you really a Democrat? And like sniffing me out. And because I'm like pro-gun, they were like, wait, I think he's a libertarian. And I'm like, I think I'm just a New Hampshire person. Like, I don't really know, I don't adhere to any ideology specifically, but that was the one thing that was pretty annoying was trying to beat that. And actually she wrote a really good op-ed and put it in the Manchester Inklink about being in the Free State Project, why she left, and just the culty nature of it. And that it's, and that some people are just really susceptible to the cult, but we're not in it.
I kind of love that about New Hampshire, though, that we're like, I think people, and I appreciate that about like your candidacy too, is that you're very open about like, I have all these beliefs that are all over the place. And that should be how all of us are, right? Like we shouldn't all align ourselves 100% to a political party because that's how we end up in the situations we're in on the federal level right now, right? It's like we all look to one person as the hero. So I think that it's great that we're having these healthy conversations. So Jon, thank you so much for coming on and doing this chat with us. I really appreciate you giving us all of this time. I know it's been almost an hour, so thank you. And I like everybody should go follow Jon, get about like you, if you have more follow-up questions, I'm sure he will respond to you directly and read your username out loud in the response. That's my favorite part when you're talking to trolls and you're like, user cocksucker327 tells me that so if you have follow-up questions, Jon, I gotta bleep that out before I put it on YouTube.
Please don't.
Thank you guys. This was really fun. I appreciate it.
Jon, thank you so much. It was great.
We had a great time, Jon.
Yeah,
we appreciate your time, man. And we plan on having like re-invites too, I think, at some point. So we'd love to have you back at some point.
Cool. I got to get you guys down to the campaign office. That was my restaurant.
Oh my gosh. I was just thinking, I was like, Jon should do like cooking, like you should do like chef's table nights, like for fundraising. Like I would pay to come and just like chat politics and eat your delicious food.
For sure.
That's the one piece of equipment that I've kept in the restaurant was the kegerator. So I still have draft beer on the first floor of my house.
That is so funny. It's dangerous.
Right. Light bulb.
It is dangerous, awesome. But yeah, we'll have a potluck at some point.
I love that. Thank you guys. It was good to talk to you. I'll talk to you guys soon.
See you guys. Thank you.